This is a glass of water, colorless, tasteless. It contains 100 gamma of LSD-25, 1/10 of a milligram, the equivalent of 1/600th of a grain. An ounce of this material will make 150,000 such doses. Let us observe the effect some 3 hours later.
Well, tell me.
Well, I just couldn't. I couldn't possibly tell you. It's here. Can't you feel it? This whole room, this everything is in color, and I can feel the air. I can see it. I can see all the molecules. I'm part of it. Can't you see it?
I'm trying.
Oh, it's just like you're released, or you're free, or I don't know how I can tell you. I wish I could talk in Technicolor, or let you see. Did you say you can see it?
No, I can't quite see it. Tell me about it.
I can't tell you about it. If you can't see it, then you'll just never know it. I feel sorry for you.
How about a positive LSD story? That would be newsworthy, don't you think? Anybody think that just once, to hear a positive LSD story? Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather.
Medicine is a key aspect of any society. Without medicine, we would not have lasted long as a species. A society that makes medicine against the law is a society that is no longer sane, which is to be expected from societies that invest so much into self-destruction. By definition, a drug is a substance that affects how the body works, whereas medicine is a drug that is used in treatment, diagnosis, or prevention of disease. This would mean that the compartmentalization of drugs in a separate category from medicine totally depends on the bias of each medical institution, which varies from country to country. And the societal framework of each country has been directly shaped by the war on drugs.
Leading medical researchers are coming to the conclusion that marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States, and we haven't begun to find out all of the ill effects, but they are permanent ill effects.
It succeeded in establishing the difference between drugs and medicine within the minds of the masses, solidifying this framework within the cultures of all modern societies. After nearly a century of deception and scrutiny, psychedelic substances have been given the chance to reintroduce themselves to the world. With the rise in the popularity of ayahuasca, scientists have turned their attention to psychedelics, conducting trials and experiments that have led to new discoveries, contrary to the lies established by the war on drugs. Lies that have been accepted as truth by the older generation, who then pass down the distorted information to the younger generation. However, no matter how much one suppresses the truth behind a wall of lies, it will eventually find a way to burst through. Regarding psychedelics, The truth is far more riveting than you realize. Even more so, the implications of that truth reveals the fallacy that is our current societal paradigm. Many have been made aware of the studies showcasing the medical benefits of psychedelics, information that I have listed in the description box of this video. For those who are not aware of the major benefits of psychedelics, I would suggest that you check out the information immediately.
There's no effective treatment for autism per se. We have no treatments for autism. We have treatments for the behavioral problems that can occur, like mood disorders or aggression or attentional problems. Although I will say, that being said, that in the late 1950s and early 1960s, several psychiatric investigators looked at the use of hallucinogens to actually treat autism. And although the research methodological standards from 50 years ago were very primitive compared to today, and we cannot draw any definitive conclusions still, these investigators reported cases of young people who by today's standards probably were autistic, although in the standards from 1960 they were considered childhood schizophrenic. But some of these kids improved quite dramatically according to the investigators who wrote about them.
Despite the growing number of people who are familiar with this information, many are still not aware of the evidence pertaining to the theory that psychedelics were the catalyst that led to higher intelligence in human beings. A pivotal role in our psychological evolution. A role in society that is still necessary for the survival of our species. Especially at this time of human history, as we pave the way to our self-destruction. The hippie movements of the 1960s were made possible by the cultural paradigm shift initiated by the use of psychedelics and the exploration of Eastern philosophy. Philosophies that run parallel to the revelations made by the use of psychedelics. While many frowned upon the younger generation for rebelling against the system, they did not realize that this was the first time in thousands of years that psychedelics would once again initiate a leap in our psychological evolution, breaking free of the mundane system that was designed to maximize profits for the ruling elite. A matrix of religious, political, and economic systems that are, in effect, the prison for the collective mind. A prison that we agreed to be the blueprint of our reality. And we maintain that prison through our complacency. Like robots, we go about our daily routines without question, because we as humans get stuck in rudimentary patterns of living, as the archaeological evidence shows. The 6 million year archaeological record of human beings showcases the stages of our development. During the first 4 million years, we made very little progress in terms of social or technological advancements. For example, it took over 1 million years for us to transition from one basic stone tool to the next. It wasn't until between 77,000 and 55,000 years ago that we find a sudden explosion in the psychological evolution of human beings. The cause of this sudden leap in our psychological evolution is presently unknown in science. While many theories are made to comprehend this anomaly, none of which are satisfactory in explaining the initial divergence between us and our primitive selves.
If you look at the at the story of human evolution as it is presented to us by mainstream science and by the work of archaeologists and anthropologists, you find that it's roughly a 6 million year story from the last common ancestor with the chimpanzee through to anatomically modern humans. And the earliest skeletons of anatomically modern humans that we have date back around 200,000 years. In fact, there's a specific skeleton from Ethiopia dated to 196,000 years, which so far is the oldest fully anatomically modern human remains that have been found. It doesn't mean that more won't be found. There may be older, but at the moment it's a pretty good guess to say that anatomically modern humans began to walk the planet about 200,000 years ago, and exactly what evolutionary processes led to that are not clear. But what's interesting is that even when the human brain is in its fully modern form, it is the same size as our brains today, as far as we can tell, the same structure, although it's difficult to know that absolutely from brain casts. The behavior of these anatomically modern humans is barely recognizable as human in the way that we would define human behavior today.
Hypothetically speaking, if a group of extraterrestrial explorers decided to visit the Earth prior to our sudden evolutionary leap, they would find that the Homo sapiens at this time were boring, dull creatures, no more intelligent than any other great ape. And while many hypothesized that aliens themselves were responsible for the creation of human beings, splicing their DNA with ape DNA, I tend to lean towards a different theory. One that is much more interesting. So at what point do we go from rudimentary, dull creatures to suddenly expressing ourselves with arts and culture? To find out, let us investigate the new information that sheds light on this mystery. In particular, the neuropsychological theory of cave art. The scientific consensus for a long time was that cave art was done by people who were simply recording their daily lives onto stone. However, since the 1980s, the paradigm has shifted. David Lewis Williams, a South African archaeologist, has done extensive work in this field, showcasing all the evidence pertaining to the fact that the rock and cave art around the world was done by ancient shamans, who were recording their visions after experiencing altered states of consciousness, as shamans from around the world still do to this day. The common trait of all shamanism is the use of so-called hallucinogenic plants and fungi, now of which are called psychedelics. When investigating the cave art around the world, you begin to realize that what you are looking at are the depictions of otherworldly entities, some of which are depicting what we today would typically identify as an alien gray. Other artwork showcases human figures who are clearly half human and half animal. These figures are so common around the world that they have been given the name therianthropes. Therianthropes are found throughout all religious mythology, implying something profound about the origins of religion. Our ancestors incorporated the use of psychedelics into their daily lives, and for thousands of years of use, the neurological changes initiated a leap in the psychological evolution of human beings.
Well, so let's look at psilocybin then in a little more detail. It has a number of properties not specifically related to its psychoactivity that make it an ideal candidate for a catalyst for the emergence of consciousness in an advanced animal. The first quality of psilocybin, which isn't specifically related to its psychoactivity, is that in small doses that are the kind you might obtain if you were just sort of eating it along with little roots, grass roots, small bugs, so forth and so on, visual acuity is improved. Specifically, edge detection is improved. Well, now, it seems to me you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that if you're in a highly competitive evolutionary environment in grassland, an environment characterized by large predators hunting cats, and also characterized by small ungulate prey, that having an increased sensitivity to edge movement, it would certainly make the difference between going home empty-handed and taking dinner home with you. So a factor which enhanced edge detection on those animals accepting that food supply into their food chain, they would have a slightly increased chance of evolutionary success as opposed to the non-psilocybin members of their group.
By virtue of the fact that the rise of cave art and culture coincides with the use of psychedelics, it would seem obvious that psychedelics helped the primitive humans expand their creative minds, which led to them learning how to cook, how to create clothing, how to manipulate sound into music, and how to create sophisticated languages. A sense of spirituality dawned within the minds of man, and shamanism emerged. Shamanism is the oldest form of religion, the first religion. The shamanistic cultures of the world adhere to the notion that the universe is multidimensional. They regarded this dimension as the material world or the physical world, while the higher dimensions are regarded as the spirit world, which they regard to be the truest form of reality. I have explored the multidimensional universe thoroughly in my third documentary entitled Self-Actualization. If you have not seen that yet, I highly recommend it, as it will make sense of what this documentary explores. What quantum physics shows is that the human brain filters out a massive amount of information in order to keep us focused on survival. Our eyes are tuned to visible light, but it is only a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. Our other senses are designed to perceive reality through specified means, such as detecting sound waves and stimulus through touch. But we cannot perceive the molecules and atoms that make up reality. Our brains cannot detect dark matter or dark energy, which together make up 97% of the universe itself. Our perception of reality is solely dependent on the filter of the mind. Psychedelics dissolves that filter for a short time, giving us the insight into the true nature of reality. There are a myriad of studies that confirm that psychedelics do indeed expand your consciousness, inducing self-actualization. By virtue of those facts alone, the continuous use of psychedelics over many generations shifted human beings from archaic apes to spiritual creatures who expressed themselves with art and culture, giving rise to shamanism, the first religion.
I believe that God left certain drugs growing naturally upon our planet to help speed up and facilitate our evolution. Okay, not the most popular idea ever expressed. Either that or you're real high and agreeing with me in the only way you can right now. Do you think magic mushrooms growing atop cow shit was an accident? Why do you think Hindus think cows are holy? Holy shit. That's God's little accelerator pad for our evolution. Because think about this, man. For billions of years, sorry, fundamentalists, we were nothing but apes. I think we can go to the moon. That is exactly how it fucking happened.
Shamanism as it stands led to the spiritual and religious traditions that have survived to this day. When studying religions, the old and the ancient, we find that they stem from shamanism, a systematic use of psychedelics to access altered states of consciousness. Displayed in the arts of ancient civilizations is the use of psychedelics. From the blue water lily in ancient Egypt, Acacia nilotica, psilocybin mushrooms in ancient Mesoamerica, soma in ancient India, and the kykeon in ancient Greece.
The presence of these psychedelics in the plant metabolism, in the biosphere, allowed a kind of informational symbiosis between human beings with highly evolved information processing capacity and the biosphere generally. And that we have no word for this that we're comfortable with. The closest word we have for it is somehow tied up with the concept of religion, religio. But for us, religion is some kind of abstract dialogue carried on with a philosophical principle. That's not what it is. Religion originally was the dimension of the self that directly interfaced nature or the overself. And this happened through the use of psychedelics.
And from these cultures arise philosophy and sacred sciences, decoding the blueprint of reality and articulating it through a mythical tongue. The revelations made in altered states of consciousness were interpreted differently by each person and each culture, but nevertheless, the philosophies are similar, if not the same. The only differences between them are taken at face value, as they are explained through different cultural dialects. If one has the right set of information at their disposal, they could read between the lines and distinguish the underlying principles in all ancient philosophies, recognizing that these philosophies coincide with the revelations made by those under altered states of consciousness via psychedelics or through endogenous means, through trance, meditation, starvation, fasting, and so on, All of these states endogenously produce DMT within the body, the most potent psychedelic known to man. Critical ancient knowledge was preserved in the form of myths and traditions, which the later less sophisticated generations rendered down into religious texts. They interpreted the information based on their limited frame of reference and thus expressed the knowledge in a coded language through cryptic mythology. The religions of today preserve ancient knowledge but can only be decoded by those who understand the language of symbolism. The Abrahamic religions in particular encode ancient knowledge into their scriptures, knowledge not even acknowledged by the faculties of these religions. Despite what people may think, these religions and their origins are deeply rooted in shamanism. The Gnostics were one of the first, if not first, sect of Christianity. They are the link between the religion of ancient Egypt and modern-day Christianity.
On this particular relief, you can see where the Western world through Judaism took a piece of a concept of the creation story from. You can see where the Greek philosophers took a concept of Greek philosophy from. And you can also see where Christianity took a concept, European Christianity took a concept from. So let's break it down. Notice the god Khnum fashioning man on the potter's wheel out of clay. This is where Judaism took a portion of this to make up their Genesis story with the Sanhedrins around 250 BC. And we see European Christianity took from the goddess Isis and Horus and made up the European, again, let me express, the European version of Mary and Jesus. And you also got Christianity right here showing Isis lactating or breastfeeding the holy child Horus, who was born of immaculate conception and virgin birth. And they took other concepts of Atum from Heliopolis creation story, or the city of On, to make up their Adam as a man, when actually it was Atum the son.
In the ancient Egyptian religion, the Immaculate Conception occurs when Osiris dies and his spirit impregnates the virgin Isis, who then gives birth to Horus, who is personified as the sun, God's son, who of which rises 3 days after the death of Osiris. The biblical story of the virgin birth and resurrection is in fact a recent rendition of the ancient Egyptian story. Nevertheless, the Gnostics had a different version of the Bible and the philosophies that pertain. For they view the physical world as a prison for the true self. We will explore this concept further in the next section of this documentary, but regarding the shamanistic origins of Christianity, the most intriguing of all Gnostic stories is the story of Adam and Eve. The reason being is that the early art of Christianity featured the tree of life as a mushroom, and not just any kind of mushroom, but an Amanita muscara mushroom, one of the most powerful psychedelics in the world, implying the concept that the tree of life is an analogy for the Amanita muscara, the fruit of knowledge. The entire story is a metaphor for the first humans achieving higher consciousness via psychedelics. Interestingly enough, the color scheme of Santa Claus, red and white, is a direct reference to the Amanita muscara, making sense of the therianthropic symbolism behind the story of Santa, the talking reindeer, and the elves. This is another example of mythos created by a psychedelic culture. This culture designed their villages to enhance the effects of the Amanita muscara, and they would gather on Christmas Eve to do psychedelics together under the grand Christmas tree. Whereas Christmas today is the exact opposite of what it originally used to be. Indeed, every holiday has been corrupted into our materialistic paradigm. The symbolism of Christ, a man who is enlightened, a healer, and a teacher, is an analogy for one achieving gnosis, Christ consciousness. Achieving gnosis, also known as enlightenment, is the process of self-actualization, the universe becoming aware of itself. If you extend your patience, you will find out things that will change your perception of reality. When studying all religions, you will find one commonality. The initial spark that ignites the religion is always a supernatural event. In the case for Islam, the same applies. Before Islam, Prophet Muhammad was a man of business and wealth. He would eventually grow resentment towards the established system, the discrimination, the mundane way of life, and the injustices. Questioning the nature of his reality, he would turn away from his status and retreat into nature, where on one occasion he would leave for over a month. During this time, he stayed at a cave at Mount Hira, where he spent his time contemplating the creation of the universe. After a long period of starvation, at the point of near death, he encountered the angel Gabriel, who commanded him to read. Unable to explain this encounter, Prophet Muhammad would spend the next 2 years trying to find answers. No matter who he would consult, no one understood his revelations. 2 years of self-doubt led to depression. Not only was he alone in his way of thinking, but he could not confirm whether or not his supernatural experience was actually real. At the point of which all hope was lost, he once again received a vision, which initiated the spiritual movement of Islam. When reading the story, it is clear that Prophet Muhammad's isolation from society, his seclusion in nature, his long periods of starvation to the point of near death, led to an endogenous release of DMT. An experience in which he interpreted based on his associative frame of reference, which at the time was predominantly influenced by the society presented to him and the Abrahamic religions established within the region. For those who do not know, DMT is the most potent psychedelic in the world, and it is found within all of us. It is only released during heavy REM sleep, long hours of meditation, birth, and death. For this reason, it is regarded by Dr. Rick Strassman, in metaphoric terms, as the spirit molecule. Strassman's research on DMT has shed light on mystical experiences that we find throughout religion. For instance, it is a common reoccurrence that people who undergo the visionary journey initiated by DMT report meeting entities in higher dimensions. It doesn't matter which cultural background the person is from. The entities are described in similar terms. In fact, there are religious systems that have survived to this very day that use psychedelics such as DMT to communicate with the so-called spirit world and the beings who inhabit it. Strassman's research suggests that people who have mystical experiences, such as Prophet Muhammad, are achieving a kind of gnosis via an endogenous release of DMT, which makes sense considering the Prophet was fasting to the point of near death when he encountered the higher dimensional entity that he interpreted as the angel Gabriel. It is worth mentioning that all Islamic art and architecture features sacred geometry, fractals, and geometric patterns that are commonly seen in DMT experiences. The most common sighting of all is the singularity, that of which gives rise to the complex nature of reality. Sacred geometry is the system of knowledge explaining the universe in terms of harmonics, proportion, frequency, and form, revealing the mysterious intelligent force behind the shaping of reality. The philosophy and art pertaining to sacred geometry is not only found in Islam, but within the great cathedrals of Christianity, as well as the iconography in Judaism, implying a direct correlation between psychedelic experiences and the genesis of religion and sacred sciences. The modern versions of Christianity and Judaism are altered versions of the original ancient Egyptian mythological stories. However, since we do not have access to the original religion in its pristine form, we have to work with the modern-day versions known to us. So let us explore the shamanistic roots of Judaism. Moses was tending to the flock of Jethro on Mount Sinai when the voice of God spoke to him through a burning bush, instructing him to free his people from Egypt. Benny Shannon, an Israeli professor of cognitive philosophy at Hebrew University, claims that Moses was using a psychedelic brew that initiated a DMT experience, allowing him to not only perceive the burning bush, but to also commune with a higher dimensional entity that he interpreted as what we now call God. The psychedelic brew was extracted from the acacia trees, and it is said in different theories that the tree itself, the burning bush, was actually an acacia tree, a tree that contains large quantities of DMT. The implications made here do not suggest that these experiences with the supernatural are hallucinations made by drugs, but rather that these are authentic experiences with the supernatural interpreted by the person's frame of reference, leading to the formation of religious mythology. Meaning, these people were actually experiencing these situations. And when you view reality through quantum physics, you will find that the universe is multidimensional, so the possibility for different entities and different realities to exist within the same space and time as our dimension is there.
The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real deep down you is the whole universe. And that vast thing that you see far off with telescopes, and you look and look and look, one day you're going to wake up and say, why, that's me. And in knowing that, you see that you never die. That you are the eternal thing that comes and goes, that appears now as John Jones, now as Mary Smith, now as Betty Brown, and so it goes forever and ever. That our real body is not just what's inside the skin, but our whole total external environment. Because you see, underneath the superficial self, which pays attention to this and that, there is another self, more really us than I. And if you become aware of that unknown self, the more you become aware of it, the more you realize that it is inseparably connected with everything else that there is.
I understood suddenly how thought was just an illusory thing. And how thought is responsible for, if not all, most of the suffering we experience. And then I suddenly felt like I was looking at these thoughts from another perspective, And I wondered, who is it that's aware that I'm thinking? And suddenly I was thrown into this expansive, amazing feeling of freedom from myself, from my problems. I saw that I was bigger than what I do. I was bigger than my body. I was everything and everyone. I was no longer a fragment of the universe. I was the universe.
Everyone is under the current assumption that the brain is the generator of consciousness. Even now as I say that, many sneer at the implied suggestion. But again, with patience comes understanding. Consciousness remains a deep mystery in modern science.
There's the question, does the brain make consciousness the way a generator makes electricity? That is the view of the reductionist tendency in science, that all our consciousness is, actually they call it an epiphenomenon of brain activity. It's actually a kind of accident that we have consciousness at all. And therefore, since our brains make our consciousness, it follows, if you hold that point of view, that when our brains are dead, flatline on the ECG, consciousness is gone. There's nothing left. It's over. Our story is over. We are just meat. We are reduced to matter. And there is nothing more to us, and it's over. If you hold that point of view, you cannot possibly believe in life after death. How could there be life after death? How could the consciousness survive death when your brain is dead? Doesn't make sense. And such things as near-death experiences, or indeed other issues that suggest non-local character of consciousness, like out-of-body experiences, telepathy. All such things must be fantasies. There can be no reality to them from the reductionist point of view.
This is why I feel it is important to view things from all fields of science. In this case, to not only view the brain from a psychological and biological standpoint, but to also view it from a quantum perspective as well.
Does anybody have any proof for what consciousness is? Not at all at this moment. But the history of the reductionist program, where we've been able to take some of the more spectacular creations that have emerged in the world and recognize that they are nothing but the product of their ingredients and the laws of physics, leads me to extrapolate that idea to the experience of consciousness. Now, having said that, there's a deep puzzle. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, which is, if electrons and quarks and particles and laws of physics are all that there is, and if you buy into the fact that electrons don't have an inner world, that quarks don't have an inner world, how can it be that by taking a collection of those particles, you can turn on the lights? How can a collection of mindless, thoughtless particles somehow yield mindful experience? And that's a deep question that science has not yet answered.
But there's another possibility if we're in this realm of analogies, which is that the relationship of consciousness to the brain might be more like the relationship of the TV signal to the TV set. And again, I got into trouble with TED even for suggesting this and for saying, and I stick by this, that there is nothing in neuroscience that rules this out. See, the materialist scientist will say, I know your brain makes your consciousness, because if I damage this or that area of your brain, this or that area of your consciousness will blink out. It will be gone. Therefore, that proves that your brain made that bit of your consciousness. But isn't that true with the TV analogy too? If you damage the TV screen, the picture won't be quite so good, will it? But the TV signal will still be there. The signal will still be perfect. And there's nothing that I'm aware of in neuroscience that rules out this possibility, that the brain is actually a transceiver of consciousness rather than a generator of consciousness. The brain is the interface between a non-material and a material realm through which consciousness manifests on this plane. And I mean, this is broadly the view of all spiritual traditions.
quantum mechanics shows us reality for what it really is, at the fundamental level. Viewing reality through the lens of quantum mechanics gives us the frame that is necessary to understand the concept that consciousness is a fundamental force of the universe. Consciousness is not just the result of randomized brain activity, but the brain activity is the result of consciousness. Concepts such as the dark matter fractal field and morphic resonance are attempts to explain this new paradigm of thought, but are all subjected to ridicule due to the current paradigm of thought that the masses agree to be the blueprint of our reality. The notion here is that the brain is not the generator of consciousness, but rather the transceiver of consciousness, meaning the psychological and biological aspects of the brain can be attributed to a machine tuning into certain bandwidths of reality. From this perspective, consciousness is not a physical thing, but a multidimensional phenomenon. This may sound far-fetched for those ingrained within the current paradigm. However, when given the chance to view the new evidence, the implications are undeniable. If anything else, quantum physics reveals that reality is far more mysterious than we could possibly imagine. Quantum physics, which is the study of the fundamentals of reality, confirms that consciousness is intimately associated with the rest of reality. In addition to the four fundamental forces of the universe, consciousness plays a vital role in the formation of self-organizing fields. There are some theorists who present this concept, but they are ridiculed by the mainstream scientists. Yet, the fact remains that science is susceptible to change, as is with all evolutionary-based systems. If one is a true scientist, they must set aside their biases and preconceived notions of reality and investigate the matter in full. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist and theorist, speaks of morphogenetic fields, responsible for shaping matter into form.
Every species has a kind of collective memory. Every individual draws on that collective memory and in turn contributes to it. I'm suggesting that this kind of memory works through the process I call morphic resonance, the influence of like upon like across space and time. And this memory is carried and expressed through fields called morphic fields. The word morphic comes from the Greek word morphe, meaning form or shape.
With frequency and vibration, matter is pulled into the first double helixes, leading to the formation of life. An analogy to demonstrate this would be cymatics. Cymatics is a subset of model vibrational phenomena in which sound is used to pull grains into geometric patterns, that of which vary depending on the frequency and vibration. Much like how the frequency of sound pulls grains into form, morphic resonance states that multidimensional fields vibrating at specific frequencies within the same place in space-time pull matter into form. These morphogenetic fields are intimately associated with consciousness, which spiritual traditions would refer to as the spirit. A direct reference to spiritual traditions around the world who, in different cultural dialects, acknowledge the underlying truth of the nature of reality. That the universe is all one, experiencing itself in different forms. Each reality being a different configuration of matter, tuned to a specific frequency. Each dimension has its own harmonic resonance. This understanding led to the formation of sacred geometry, which is ultimately the study of the nature of reality. This system of knowledge as well as all ancient spiritual traditions, stem from the use of psychedelics. Psychedelics, that of which remove the filter of the mind, allowing a wide range of information to be perceived by the conscious living receiver.
Liberation from the hallucination that you are just poor little me. To wake up from that kind of hypnosis and discover that your organism, your physical body, your conscious attention, that you are something being done by this vast, indescribable self, which is out of time, which has no beginning, no end, neither continues nor discontinues. It's beyond all categorization whatsoever. Can become aware. And that is what somebody who is moksha, who is liberated, sees. He sees, shall we say, that everything goes together. Just as fronts go with backs and tops with bottoms, insides with outsides. So everything that there is goes together. And it makes no difference whether it lasts a long time or whether it lasts a short time. A galaxy goes together with all the universe just as much as a mosquito, which has a very short life.
The systems presented to mankind are designed to divide the human race and destroy the earth.
I know this is not a comment that will go down well with many people, but I am strongly opposed to nationalism. I don't see any virtue in nationalism. It is an accident of birth, which nation you were born in. It was nothing that you did for your own merit. You didn't earn that. You were born by accident in a particular nation. Why should we automatically feel that other people who were born by accident in that particular nation have something special in common with us, and that we together are a group who are much more important than other groups of people? I've been privileged to spend my life traveling around the world, living with communities all over the world, and one thing that really comes across to me strongly, it should be a cliche, and yet it's not, is that we are all one family. That humans are intimately interconnected all around the world, that you can go to the remotest area of the Amazon jungle and find the same hopes, the same fears, the same dreams that we have in industrialized cities, shared by the hunter-gatherers in the middle of the Amazon. Our similarities as human beings and what we share in common at the emotional level and the level of love and at the level of heart are far more important than our differences that are defined by the nation or the political group in which we grew up in. And when I say I'm against nationalism, I need also to make clear that does not mean, and I hope I'm not taken out of context by others who are listening to this, that does not mean I'm in favor
of world government. I detest governments. That's another thing we need to grow out of. We don't need governments anymore. If we have them, they should have a very minimal role. I think it's possible for the human race to relate as one family without leaders and governments who are exploiting the worst aspects of our character, the lowest common denominator of our society, deliberately encouraging fears and hatreds and suspicion. What responsible leaders should be doing is encouraging love and unity. And their failure to do that, in my view, disqualifies them from the leadership role.
Your society can preach about being righteous all at once. It doesn't change its actions.
The old-growth rainforest being cut down and replaced with soybean farms so we can feed cattle so that we can all eat hamburgers. Only a truly insane global state of consciousness could allow such an abomination to occur. And I did a back-of-an-envelope calculation during the Iraq War. It seems to me that 6 months' expenditure on the Iraq War would have solved the problem of the Amazon forever, would be sufficient to compensate the peoples of the Amazon so that no single tree ever needed to be cut down again to garden and look after that amazing resource. But we can't make that decision as a global community. We can spend countless billions on warfare, on hatred, on fear, on suspicion, on division, but we can't get together the collective effort to save the lungs of our planet. And this is perhaps why shamans from the Amazon are now mounting a kind of reverse missionary activity. When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. Unless you reconnect with spirit and do so soon, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down around your heads and ours. And rightly or wrongly, they believe that ayahuasca is the remedy for that sickness.
If the world redirected their expenditure from military to agriculture, education, energy cultivation, we would solve the problems of the world forever. As I've said before, it all starts with each person undergoing self-actualization. With enough people undergoing the process of self-actualization, the paradigm will slowly but surely shift. These are medicinal plants that not only detox the body and mind, but they also widen your awareness, giving you the opportunity to perceive reality through an unfiltered lens, dissolving the artificial value systems that have manipulated the mind.
I believe that what makes the psychedelic experience so central is that it is a connection into a larger modality of organization on the planet, which is a fancy way of saying it connects you up to the mind of nature herself. The planet is not just a hodgepodge of competing species. That's the old evolutionary model. And people like Lynn Margulis and James Lovelock have been suggesting for years that the Earth is a kind of thermostatic self-regulator. Well, if you carry that idea far enough, thermostatic self-regulator is a way of saying a kind of computational engine, a kind of computer, a kind of mind, a kind of mind. The Gaian mind. The reason those mushroom-eating, orgiastically behaving people worshipped a great horned goddess, the reason they imaged the numinous other as feminine was because they had a connection into a kind of overarching intelligence that they instinctively and intuitively felt to be feminine. And we retain this in our languages as the idea of Mother Nature and the femininity of the land and so forth and so on. But it's just become a distant metaphor to us. I think our intelligence is a source of toxicity to nature and discomfort to ourselves unless our values are based on planetary values, are linked to the values of the rest of nature. And that means we need to fit ourselves more appropriately into the scheme of things. We need to realize that there is a hegemony of life on the planet, not necessarily a hegemony of intelligence. Intelligence is not a license to trample. The proper role of intelligence in a planetary ecology is that of gardener, caregiver, and maintainer of balance.
Like a rose that grew through concrete, the new paradigm was struggling to grow through the layers of societal and cultural conditioning, and it was ultimately crushed by the powers that be. And yet, with the rise of the New Age movement, the rose continues to grow. In a time of war and tension, in a time of ignorance and destruction of all that is sacred, psychedelics rises once again to change the cultural paradigm. All it takes is a global effort. I spoke of a multi-generational reconstruction project in Framing Reality, an outline for shaping human civilization. However, I left out a crucial aspect of the plan: the use of psychedelics to change our culture. By using psychedelics such as ayahuasca, the culture would completely change over the course of generations. This new culture would make it possible for a political paradigm shift, the new generation applying themselves to the political systems, slowly phasing out the old. To redesign human civilization, dissolving the national borders and political systems of old, introducing new city designs that maintain the equilibrium with the surrounding environment, and of course, redesigning our methods of energy cultivation from nuclear fission and fossil fuels to thorium-based reactors and geothermal power.
Thorium is a naturally occurring nuclear fuel that is 4 times more common in the Earth's crust than uranium. It's so energy dense that you can hold a lifetime supply of thorium energy in the palm of your hand. We could use thorium about 200 times more efficiently than we're using uranium now.
We will design machines that will do the menial work, replacing all the mundane and redundant jobs, so that human beings can focus their time on living life to the fullest. By the end of this phase, all economic systems will simply be obsolete, and at that point, humanity can finally break free of all the mental prisons, once and for all.
So if there's one thing the history of evolution has taught us, it's that life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but life finds a way.
The Eastern and Aboriginal philosophies of the world speak of the universe in terms of duality. As the yin and yang shows, the black cannot exist without the white. This understanding helps one to see that all that has happened, the good and the bad, are all part of the divine process, cycles upon cycles. The Age of Darkness is simply a phase within the grand cycles of time. It too will pass, and we will re-enter an Age of Light, and the ruling elite know that, which is why they are ramping up the fear tactics and warmongering to instill fear and panic among the masses and attempt to resist the paradigm shift. But they will fail, for their time has come. Psychedelics are playing a major role in this great paradigm shift. More and more people around the world are discovering the potential of these tools for consciousness. that humans today are much like the early humans, who were stuck in rudimentary routines. If it wasn't for the discovery of psychedelics, they would never have undergone the process of self-actualization. These tools of consciousness were essential to the psychological evolution of our species. So much so, we integrated them within our cultures for thousands of years. Using these tools, we have gained access to the higher dimensional perspectives of reality, discovering the truth that quantum physics reveals, that all matter in the universe originated from a singularity, implying that we are all one.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. Has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.
This perception is key to understanding the true nature of reality. By cutting psychedelics off from our culture, we have in effect cut ourselves off from our own psychological evolution. The forces of darkness ensured that humanity would be left in ignorance for thousands of years. But the spark has been ignited. The resurgence of the psychedelic culture will pave the way for a multi-generational reconstruction project, giving the generations of the future the chance to continue the work of our long-forgotten ancestors, honoring their memory by healing the earth, restoring the natural order, and to take our place in the circle of life. On a final note, one of the fundamental teachings of ayahuasca is that the physical world is the least important part of yourself. The most important part of yourself is your spirit. That is your true self. Our spiritual evolution goes beyond the physical dimension. This life is part of a multidimensional universal process, and it is one that is meant to be experienced. You were born as a human being for a reason. You chose this experience at this time of human history, because our actions now will ripple through time. Let us break free from our confinement, step outside of our comfort zone, and evolve together. I hope to see you all at an ayahuasca ceremony one day. This is David Al-Badri, signing off.
Mutation. It is the key to our evolution. It is how we evolved from a single-celled organism to the dominant species on the planet. This process is slow, normally taking thousands and thousands of years. Given the chance, evolution leaps forward.